do. So it is an issue if you've got cookies on your website. You'll need to be compliant, you need to be aware of it. So Nick and Gary will take you through that and also take you through some of the stuff around my data as well as an individual. So they're just setting that up now. Oh, cookies policy. In fact, you probably noticed, Ricardo and Georgia were doing the presentation, the little requests kept coming up about cookies. So, and it's a question now of actually going beyond that in terms of GDPR rules for cookies, because some of the cookies are collecting your data, either in terms of a session cookie or a private passwords for the user cookies, or also for advertising. So, which is why you go and look for maybe a motorbike for your 85-year-old father, and you'll all of a sudden get motorbike adverts. So, okay, I'll leave over to Garry and Nick now to take this along.
Right. I don't even know where my clicker's gone, and I didn't have much success with it last time, so we'll go without. Okay, so cookies. Very much a thorn in the side of the EU and of our very own Information Commission office, and there's some very good reasons for it. The ICO have. There's basically two reasons why cookies are so important, and the first one is as a result of surveys that the ICO has basically done over the last few years, and the findings are actually quite shocking. Can you read that? Is that big enough for you to see? For those that can't, 41% are unaware of the different types of cookies that are implanted on a machine. 13% indicated that they fully don't understand how cookies work. 37% had heard of cookies but did not understand how they worked. And 2% of people basically had no idea what a cookie was. 37% said they didn't know how to manage them, i.e. clear out the history, clear out the cookie files. And it's basically led to a major concern for the ICO that, and it's around consent, and we're basically looking at two forms of consent with cookies. There's I think went a bit backwards there. We're looking at something called prior consent, and we're looking at implied consent. And cookies effectively ticks both of those, if that's the right way. So. Prior consent is this idea that you can, without a driving licence, jump in a car, drive around, on the understanding that in 12 months' time you'll get a licence. It's really not the done thing in about 99% of all instances where you're asking for consent. But that's exactly what happens with cookies. You log onto a site, they're active. As soon as you go on, they're active. Assuming that at some point, instead of clicking the little X button on the cookie banner, you're actually going to go in and you're going to verify that you actually want cookies on your system. Secondly, it's that X button, and this is what we're talking about, the implied consent. The fact that you've allegedly read the T&C that comes up on the cookie banner and you've decided to ignore it is implied consent. Given the survey that you've just seen, the ICO and the EU are very unhappy with this. If you think of the different types of cookies that are on there, we're looking at session cookies. So these are they're probably the simplest, most safest, less intrusive cookie you can get, and they will keep your website functioning. And that can be something as simple as just keeping your shopping basket open, or even more basic functionality than that. The second level would be what are called persistent cookies. So this is the things that remember your passwords, they remember your forms, and they just keep your site nice and easy to use the next time you come back in it again. And then the big one for the ICO is the third-party cookies. And outside of the local authority environment, in a more commercial environment, we're really talking about sharing, and we're talking about ads, and we're talking about something that I believe is on 90 million websites, and that's a little thing called Google Analytics, which is basically, from your angle, from a local authority angle, it's providing you with a nice set of figures as to how this is actually being, the site's being viewed, and it's giving you some very useful statistics for it. But there is no guarantees what's happening with that information, in so much as is how that is being compiled upstream and what's actually happening to it. Now the ICO aren't saying you cannot use cookies. In fact, in a lot of GDPR, they're not saying you can't do what you're currently doing. But what they are saying is you have to be absolutely clear what you're doing with it. So, the next part about, and that's just a comment that came from that was a direct quote taken from the ICO. So I'll just give you a moment to read that if you can.
I want to read it out.
Sorry?
I'd read it out.
Oh my, oh here we go.
No pressure.
Nobody complains about cookies. Why are you expecting people to spend lots of time complying with these rules? That was from the ICO FAQ and comment section. And the ICO's response to that was, one of the purposes of these rules is to increase individuals' awareness and understanding so they can decide whether they object to cookies or not. Those who use cookies have a part to play in educating consumers and making the case to the individuals with concerns about why cookies you want to use are beneficial. So the ICO is putting the onus on you as web owners, that you can use this stuff, but you have to be absolutely clear as to what you're doing with it, why you're using it, who are the third parties that are involved. Yeah? Okay. Oh. Okay, the second part about cookies is about perception. One of these doesn't know the hang of this. The website of a local authority is the world's window into your authority. It's where you set the tone. It's where you set, this is what we look like, this is what we do, it's how you create your persona. With cookies, it's the very public initial impression you give of what your attitude to GDPR is. Now, mostly your deletion policies, your privacy policies, the documents that you keep in the legal department, they're all buried away. Now, they can be accessed, but you've got to go through a process and you'll get there. With cookies, it's front and centre, it's on your website, and it does give that first impression of how seriously you treat data protection and an individual's right to the information that you hold. So that was all I really wanted to say on the PowerPoint about that, and that was really why. And also ICO cookie guidance PDF is actually a very powerful resource, but that's just a preamble as to why we actually went down the route we did regarding cookies. So I now just need to get back onto our website. So now, cookie policy, very, very front and centre. It's in your face. So the idea of the X in the top right hand corner, that's gone. The wording that's in there, okay, this is our example. Whatever wording you want to go for, that will go in there. But basically, it's much more prominent. It's not just a banner anymore, it's there. It's in a pop-up.
You can't dismiss it.
No, you can't actually, well you can, but the get rid of it button is much lower down here somewhere. So rather than click on that, just go into review privacy settings. So now, what we've actually got to is another pop-up, and this ordinarily would have been buried very deep in a privacy policy somewhere. Probably would have been a link in an initial cookie banner, But now, again, we're making this specifically about cookies. And what we're actually doing here is we're breaking them down into actually a wider group than the ICO recommend. They were talking about session, persistent cookies, and they were talking about third-party cookies. So now what we've done is break these down into much more non-techie friendly categories. So, required cookies, an explanation of roughly what these do, but if we now click into required cookies, we have this, and this actually breaks down each and every cookie with a whole list of information, descriptive terms that tell you what these cookies actually do. And if you want even more information, we do have contact points here that can escalate for further information requests. So those are the session cookies, and I think you've probably put a couple of the persistent ones in there. As I said, GDPR doesn't actually stop you doing anything, so long as you can actually document why you're doing it, and what if it's subject to a deletion policy, what your deletion or disablement policy is. Okay, so now we can go down to analytical cookies, and again, there we have it, Google Analytics. And what we've actually done here, same things again, only this time, the terms and conditions actually takes you to Google and Google Analytics. And from there you can actually find out what their actual terms and conditions are. More interestingly though, up to now, with cookies, the general way to do this has been accept all cookies, reject all cookies. That's it, it's all or nothing. Now, what we've done is produce this. We're now looking at blocking individual types of cookies as opposed to a blanket stop. Now, my question to Nathan was so I penciled this out, and then Nick sort of took my idea and actually made it look good. But the other question I had was to Nathan, can we actually code this? And he had a look round and thought, yes, we can do it. Now, you're going to have to take that on face value. However, Dave's worked with Nathan for about 6 or 7 years now. And if Nathan says he can do it, what would your response to that be?
He's my boss there. Well, obviously we've got internal professionals as well who would check that. We've got security leads, and we would run it past them. But yeah, I'd fully expect if he says he can do it, he's capable of doing it. Yeah,
and that's how we work with Nathan. And there is that level of trust that goes on, and that's happened with us at Southwark because of 5 years of working together. And that's very much a way we build relationships. You saw the schools demo before, non-technical, but they've actually come up with an extremely powerful site. Right, okay, I've got off the subject a little bit there. So this is the principle that we're going for now, is that the cookie banners are actually a lot more specific. They're a lot more in your face, for want of a better word. And we can actually now get to a much granular level in terms of what an individual user allows on the site and what they don't allow on the site. We can now scroll down to the bottom. So we've split it into social media and we've gone down to advertising. Now, you might not like this idea.
Can I make one thing?
Go on, yeah.
This era of Cambridge Analytica and people being upset about what people do with their data, some people may be more aware that Facebook can travel between websites. Let's say it will share your session via cookies between your session might innocently be between two websites, but you may not be aware that you accepted their terms of use. So we are now pushing that responsibility to the user by saying, well, actually, I don't want Facebook to know that I've gone here, even if they've got the Facebook widget on the website, and so they can turn it off. So if you can look at the list there, you'll be familiar if you own a website, you do social media cookies. This will range between different sites and what you've chosen to embed as a third party for the script. But here are some popular ones.
We're having a question at the back already.
I think
Have
Tim.
we got
I've
to
got
the
a
end yet?
question.
Yeah.
We have a deal with the Guardian,
Yeah.
and we have impressions. We've bought so many impressions. So basically, they say someone's searching for jobs in Southwark.
Right.
If they've been using that search term and they log into Facebook, then they will see our Southwark impression.
Yeah.
Will that affect that service?
Yeah,
We can do, yeah.
Yeah.
We can
that's exactly what it will do.
arrange it so that the user can now
Turn
opt
that
out.
off.
They can opt out of what
Right.
you're opting them in on
This-
their behalf for
Okay.
This is
GDPR.
this is a very this is
We bought that service.
to be honest, I was asked by the local government office of ombudsman to look at their cookie policy, and I just yeah sure. 4 or 5 days later, and 15 hours a day of reading, I thought I'd disappeared down the rabbit hole with it. But this is why GDPR is here, because of data sharing and the surreptitious. I'm using language like this, but this is what's happening. People are not aware. Individuals, and that's a key. Sorry, I'm flirting about all over the place here. GDPR is not about you guys as local authority professionals. It isn't. It's about the rights of the individual. And from what I'm saying about the ICO is not happy with the level of public awareness of cookies and what's actually happening behind the scenes. And the ICO doesn't go this far with their cookie policy, but that's only because they're not sure the technology is widely enough available at the moment to get there. This is now. And yes, there has been so much talk. You mentioned that one, but the one that's been getting all the airtime at the moment is Google Analytics. Now Google, and we can't quite get to the bottom of this, Google are now maintaining that they can offer the same Google Analytics service but anonymously. And I followed the links, and I didn't know Google had written so much stuff. There's just mountains of it, and I can't quite figure out how they're doing it. I know Nathan's had a good look. He can't figure out how they're doing this anonymously. But that's almost irrelevant. What your responsibility is to report to the individual what you're doing with the information, and it's on the individual whether they wish to allow you to do it.
So,
If you don't, there'll be a fine.
so you've chosen a method to use a mobile page to present the cookie policy.
Yeah.
You've then chosen to use 2 action buttons to say yes or no. Are you actually event tracking the buttons?
No.
So you won't know whether a mobile process of actually putting the splash page up is to be more effective than actually just a standard page.
Correct, and that's sort of the point, isn't it? The anonymisation of what's going on.
But some users may find that more irritating than the standard banner.
Maybe more irritating, but they will understand it. And once it's set,
So once you agree to it, it wouldn't come up again.
it's
You
saved.
do say that's a cookie, as in that's a persistent cookie that
And
we do
here-
say in the list.
Here's the rub. You clear out your cookie cache, and up pops the banner again, and you have to reset. But the only way you can remember what's on a PC is by installing a small piece of text software, which is otherwise known as a cookie. So we're in this loop now. Okay, and that, again, sort of a lead taken from the ICO. Click on there, and we should be back into the cookie policy. I don't know what's happened there.
claim it.
Well, it's-
F5.
No,
Sorry?
F5.
good question.
So
Can I just answer this question for this lady here for a second? One thing you could do is one of the options could be generated on your site to say, one of the things we have is, here's the benefits, are you okay to keep it?
Okay.
Yeah? Because it's
That's-
kind of blanket, but that can be expanded, because if you're putting that in there, but the key thing is letting people know.
Yeah.
And then they can choose, but you just explain the reason why it's there.
Right.
I've obviously
Just to follow on from your point about it being irritating, for most users, seeing any form of
Pop-up.
alert to say there's a cookie that you have to consent to is mildly irritating, I agree. So with this little workflow, you can actually dismiss it and use the recommended cookies. However, what we're suggesting, and for any clients that are unaware of how to present themselves in a sort of transparent, open way about data and what they do with it on behalf of your session, whether you log in or not, doesn't really matter, because cookies are that point at which you visit a website and then you are tracked depending on the website and what it does. So what we've done here is try to do our best to keep the user experience continuing as normal, but also give the consumer the chance to review what they're really sharing. And it really puts the power in their hand. And if you review your privacy settings, you can see with different websites will have groups of cookies that do different things, and it will change per client. We've done our best to show a proof of concept between, if you could click review, sorry. We've tried our best to make a design that's, first of all, easy to read and understand, but also very clear on the action that you can take. If you want to take control or not, it's there, it's for the user, and that's what Gary's been saying. GDPR, really, the obligation is to really put that opportunity in the user's hands and not assume that they consent.
I think the strategy feels spot on this, because mobile pages have a bad reputation. There's a lot of arguments about mobile pages, and I'm just surprised you use mobiles as a method to present it.
It's a certain proof of concept, and if there are objections, this could easily be a link to another page.
Yeah. But it works responsively. Say, modal is just an indication that you have gone to the site and something's just blocking you for a moment before you realise you're in the wrong place. So the idea of a transparent background gives you a bit of continuity, you realising you are at the right website, but now there's something for you to review first.
But if a client wanted to open up in a brand new page, there's no reason
Yeah.
you couldn't configure the system to do that. That's no point.
That takes us on to our, is that it? Have we covered that one?
Yeah, just to sort of point out that you can see here that use recommended settings is there, but as soon as you try and customise anything, a new call to action appears at the bottom. If you scroll a wee bit, then just scroll vertically.
Oh, it's already changed to say custom set.
You can see it now. The call to action is to say yes, I want to block social media. I'm confirming that. So for any authorities or clients that have third-party cookies, the big one being Google Analytics, you're going to need to review this with your users. If you don't, I'm not sure what the ICO will do, but
it falls under third-party data sharing.
yeah. So our kind of lead on this is to try and to lead on it rather than just copy everyone else.
And to educate the user, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think transparency is the best policy if you're going to deal with people that need to sign in and create accounts and trust you with their information. This sort of approach, I think, is the best way to earn trust.
With the settings they're all on at the moment, to begin with, do they all have to be turned off and the user has to turn them on?
No, this was the prior consent argument I was talking about earlier. At the moment, the ICO isn't comfortable with it, but they have recognised the state of the industry, the state of the internet, technology, and at the moment that they're happy, I won't use the word happy, they're okay going with the prior consent. I believe there is going to be maybe not a new cookie law, but an update to cookie laws that could well change. And this is very much an attempt to address that before it actually happens. So at the moment, it's business as usual in that cookies are on when you land on a site, but that could change depending on the next update to regulation.
And just drawing cookies to a close, if you subscribe to emails, you may have had some emails from organisations saying we're updating our privacy policy, if you want to steal the from us. In a sense, it's the same what we're doing for cookies now. So what you're doing is when visitors come onto your website, you're asking them the same thing. You're still happy for us to collect cookies on the site for you, and these are the cookies that are there. So this is like best practice, good practice, putting the local authority front and centre stage above, saying we take your data privacy very, very seriously, and you've got the ability to tailor the cookie settings as you wish.
I was just wondering if this enhancement was free for existing customers.
We can certainly negotiate terms.
And I think is it one last thing?
Yes.
There's one last thing, and then we've wrapped up. So
right, okay, so this is as far as Web Labs would take a proof of concept with a client, but there's a process before that where we basically debate amongst ourselves where we go. What's the extension for the data? Not on Edge. I just refresh it on the circle, seems to work. The ideas anyone?
It's probably that cookie.
Yeah. Go to Google.
Oh, well, you connect to
Do details, does it say you can skip it?
Yeah, totally.
refresh the page, see if it works. I know that it's with the.
By the way, there's a couple of articles on the website about this that we've put together. If you scroll down, you'll see there's a sort of, sorry, what was it, sort of a feature, it's almost this.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've written a couple of articles. One of them's a slightly more in-depth version of what I said this morning about making the link between GDPR and a digital transformation agenda. I had a few issues trying to understand GDPR initially, as I think a lot of people did. And in order to try and figure out where the authorities were going with this, I created a data protection timeline.
Support, you want to just find out the connect, I think the Wi-Fi connector might have done.
And that goes back all the way to 1980. That is very worthwhile reading. And a lot of it stems to something called Safe Harbour. That was, the EU had a number of agreements in place where they'd agreed to, under circumstances you could share information between countries. But I think there were a number of issues where that Safe Harbour agreement was being abused or just smashed into the ground. And if it said things like Edward Snowden, you probably get the idea of where I'm going with this. And there was a belief that GDPR really had to be, data protection rules really had to be toughened up and strengthened. So the timeline's on our website, and it's well worth a visit if you're interested in the history of data protection. What?
I was just getting rid of the old So I was just going to show you this article so you know where to go. They're well worth a read. If you can't really remember what we were talking about, there are these two articles here, the green buttons. So have a read in your own time.
And enjoy.
And enjoy the world of data.
Right, okay, so as I said, the cookie policy we showed you is as far as we can go with proof of concept. Now it's a discussion with a client as to this is what we think. This is much more in the more embryonic stages where we're still arguing amongst ourselves about what we should see on there and what we shouldn't. And this is the personal data centre. So, first part.
Just look at this is a My Southwark account. Someone has logged in, and they now have an option to talk about consent to certain types of privacy.
So, first thing we see on here is expiries. So rather than a department deciding, I want 6 months for this, and another department saying, I want 12 months for that, not their decision. The decision goes back to the individual. They get to decide whether they want the reminder every 6 months, every 12 months, or every 18 months. If you think about the alternative to this, you have each department sending out reminders based on their own timescales whenever they wish. And the client's just going to be inundated with reminders every year. It's just not really a feasible way to do it. So what we do is we let the user, the individual, set their expiry date. You know, I want to be reminded every 12 months. I want to be reminded every 2 years. So moving down from there.
Maybe just click it off first.
Right, so click the off button and you get the disclaimers. Now the debate we're having here is where that button should sit. Because clearly, having talked about council tax earlier and several other instances, there are instances where you can't actually, the individual doesn't have the right to remove information. So we've got this. If you click yes, all my Southwark data will be removed and no longer available, which you've got to go through, yes, I want to close my account. No, I want to keep my Southwark. Anything to add on that one?
No, just hit no.
Okay, so now we list what's in the portal, and at the moment it's mostly on-off buttons, but where you've got the council tax and the business rates, there's clearly a much deeper explanation needs to happen as to what's going on with this information, what's happening with this information. And a point you made, unlike the cookies, this isn't nodal, this is actually page-based. So it isn't really, if you have a preference to avoid the nodal version, that isn't really much of an issue. Yeah, so I'm not sure if there's anything behind this at the moment.
No.
Oh, yeah. And again, there you go. If you can speak Latin, it's all clear as day. But yes, it's going to take you to the policy for that department. And you know, there's an argument you could say that this is where the on-off button sits. But again, this is up for debate. It's part of the discussion that Sarah and Nick had with schools about how this is developed. It's a two-way flow. We've come up with the overall concept, and now it's up to a client to run with it and mould it into the shape you want to see it.
Likewise, another thing to point out is it's all about self-service. The user can find out what the policy is without necessarily having to ring you up.
Yeah, the idea is in each department we would expand it so you can say what
what information Facebook have on you. You can actually do that transaction in Facebook now. So this is not that, but this is a step towards transparency, I like to think. Quite simple, really.
Yeah.
Could you link it into a freedom of information request from the user's perspective if they wanted to find out what exactly that information
We
is.
can
for our
certainly do a
members,
form
of
of that
course.
where they make a request that goes off to the Freedom of Information process.
I mean, the advantage is that if they're logged in, then we know who they are.
Mm.
We know where they live.
And going back to
We can send all that information.
what I was saying this morning about one data source equals X risk and 100 data sources equals 100 times the risk plus all the other stuff. The key is really, in any large organisation, is identifying where this bloody stuff is. That's the key.
And having a switch on each of these as a different web service rather than just in one place. Because how easy it is for the user. You've got all these third-party systems as a council, you're going to have to try and, whether it's newsletters, which I know councils are quite commonly send out, or different services that they've subscribed to. It's in one place, it's going to be so much easier for the user to trust you and consent.
And also, from an administration point of view, as with all of these advances, with the school site, there was a huge amount of work, obviously done by Sarah and Nick on the development side, but then that caused you to rethink how you did everything, reanalyse it, and just as much work on your side trying to figure out what you actually wanted. It's going to be exactly the same for every department.
Okay. Okay. I thought I did say one hand at the back, but I don't know if the question's been answered. But,
No, we're just saying we probably need it on our site. That'd be another
and
email.
I think what's interesting when David answered the question is, technologically, it's actually quite easy to do this. Culturally, it's more difficult, I think, in terms of what's the actual impact for the organisation, in terms of how it manages its data. What data does it hold? And again, how does it manage that? One of the first questions we had this morning was about retention and holding of data. And I think you just come back to data is the new oil or the new gold in the digital economy. So it's a question of how you manage that as a resource, and indeed as a precious resource. Okay.
And sorry, just one final thing. Yes, I do have permission to put those children on that screen. They're mine, and they're both over 20 now.
Okay, and that's the end of our formal presentation. I want to thank you very much indeed for joining us today and for taking part. We hope you found the information useful and worthwhile. We're around now if you want to have one-to-one discussions. We can talk about Alexa, we can talk about GDPR, we can talk about mobile working, sort of schools, nice sort of. It's an opportunity, please. We're here. We'd love to talk to you about any queries that you might have. And so thank you very much indeed for attending today. Okay, see you everybody.